Welcome to Stillwater Chronicles. Tonight, we settle into a story about a river that flows the wrong way after dark. There is a kind of quiet that only belongs to rivers. Not silence exactly. Rivers are never truly silent. There is always the low, continuous sound of moving water, the tick of a stone turning over in a current, the sigh of the surface meeting the bank. But underneath all of that, there's a quiet, a deep, structural stillness that lives beneath the sound, the way a forest lives beneath its canopy. You feel it rather than hear it. It settles into you if you let it. Cole had been letting it settle into him for 6 years. Every October, he came to the same cabin, the one with the pine floors worn soft by decades of boots, the woodburner in the corner that the owner had described as reliable, in a way that suggested it had earned that word through suffering, the wide porch that extended over the water on timber legs, so that when you stood at the railing in the mornings, you were standing above the river itself, and the river moved beneath you, and the world felt very still and very large at the same time. He came to fish. He came to write. He came, though he had never said this to anyone, because the cabin was the only place where time moved at the right speed. Everywhere else, it slipped. It compressed. It rushed past him in a blur of obligations and small urgencies. Here, each hour arrived fully formed and complete. He could hold them. This year, he had arrived on the 2nd of October. The drive up from Bergen had taken 4 hours, the last 40 minutes on a road that wound through pine forest so dense and so dark that even in early afternoon, the headlights had felt necessary. The cabin key was under the same flat stone it always was. The woodburner needed the same coaxing it always did. The river was exactly where he had left it. He had poured himself a small whiskey and sat on the porch and watched the current move south, the way it always moved, the way rivers in this part of Norway had always moved, down from the mountains, through the forest, toward the coast. The water was dark and clear in the way of deep rivers, the kind of clarity that reveals its own depth, that shows you the bottom and somehow makes it look further away than it is. Leaves moved on the surface. A branch stripped pale by the water. The occasional ring of a fish rising. Ordinary. Familiar. His. He stayed on the porch until the light went, and the light in October goes early and completely. The sky turning from gray to a dark that has no gradations, no twilight softening. One moment the tree line was visible. The next, it was simply the shape of darkness against a darker sky. He went inside. He made dinner. He read for an hour beside the woodburner, the fire warm and dry, the logs shifting and resettling in the way fires do when they are at the height of their work. Outside, the river moved. He could hear it through the wooden walls. That low, continuous sound. South. Always south. He went to bed at 10, and he would not have known anything was different at all, except that he woke at 2 in the morning, for no reason he could name, and lay still in the dark, listening. The river was quiet, not in the way rivers go quiet during drought, when the water drops and slows and loses its voice. This was a different quiet, a held quiet, a breath between words quiet. He lay there and listened to it and tried to locate what was wrong, the way you try to locate a sound in a dark room, turning your attention slowly, reaching for the edges of it. And then Softly, the sound returned, but it was wrong. It took him a moment to understand why, because the wrongness was subtle, the kind that your body recognizes before your mind does, the kind that raises the small hairs on the back of your arms before you have found the words for it. He lay there and listened, and slowly the words arrived. The river was moving upstream. He told himself this was impossible. He told himself he was half asleep, that the mind at 2 a.m. is not a reliable instrument, that sounds travel strangely through wood and water and night air. He listened harder, and the sound was unmistakable. The same river, the same voice, but the direction of it had changed. Not dramatically, not like a flood reversing in some violent geological event. Just quietly, purposefully, the water was flowing the other way, upstream, toward the mountains. He got up. The pine floor was cold under his bare feet. He pulled on the fleece he kept draped over the chair and opened the door to the porch and stood at the railing in the dark. The river moved below him in the faint gray light that the sky lends to water even on dark nights. He could see the surface. He could see the direction of it. Leaves moved past beneath him, moving north. A pale branch drifted by, moving north. The current was gentle and even, and entirely, quietly wrong. Cole stood at the railing for a long time. The air smelled of pine resin and cold water and something else, something he could not name and would not try to, because the naming of it seemed important in a way he was not ready for. He watched the river move the wrong way and felt the cold come up through the boards of the porch and settle into his feet. And he did not go back inside. By the time the sky began to pale, not light exactly, just a lessening of dark, the river had shifted again. He had watched it happen. The stillness first, that same held breath pause, the surface flattening to something almost glassy, the movement suspending itself for perhaps 30 seconds that felt very much longer. And then, slowly, the current reasserting itself in the correct direction. South, down from the mountains, the right way, as if nothing had happened at all. Cole did not sleep again that night. He sat inside with his coffee and his notebook and wrote down what he had seen in the precise, careful way he had once written field notes. Time, duration, observations, questions. He had been a journalist before he became whatever he was now. And the old habit of accurate notation was one of the better things it had left him. He did not write about how it had felt. He was not ready for that. The following night, he set up his phone on a small tripod at the corner of the porch railing, angled down toward the water. He pressed record at 11 p.m., went inside, and did not allow himself to watch the screen. He had made a rule. Record first. Watch after. He did not want his attention to change what was happening, though he understood dimly that this concern had a particular flavor of superstition to it that he did not entirely trust. He woke at 2:15. He stood at the porch door and did not go out. He listened. Upstream. In the morning, he watched the footage. The phone had recorded 6 hours of river. For the first 2 hours, the water moved south, dark and clear and ordinary. And then, at 12:53 a.m., it stopped. That glassy stillness. He watched the surface and felt something cold move through him that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. And then the current reversed. Slowly, without drama. The leaves on the surface turned and began to drift north. A cluster of pine needles moved upstream. Something pale drifted through the frame. He paused the footage and looked at it for a long time before allowing himself to understand it was a fish. Dead. Drifting upstream with the rest of it, carried by whatever was pulling the river in the wrong direction. He watched until 4:48 a.m., when the river stopped again, and then resumed its southward course. 4 nights. 3 hours and 55 minutes each time. Precise. He should have left. He knew that. He had the self-awareness to recognize the particular shape of what he was doing. The way certain things catch in you like a hook, and you tell yourself you are investigating. You are gathering information. You are simply trying to understand. And all of that may even be true, but it does not account for the fact that you have not packed your bag. That the drive back to Bergen felt, in some way, he could not quite articulate. Like moving away from something, rather than towards something. That the cabin, which had always felt like an arrival, now felt like a proximity. He filmed the river every night. On the 4th night, he took the footage further, scrolled back through the timestamps, slow, looking for details he had missed. The leaves moving upstream, the occasional dead fish, and then something else, which he had to watch 3 times before he was certain he was seeing it correctly. Debris. Not just leaves and needles and the occasional fish. Larger things. Things that had no business being in the river. On the 2nd night, what appeared to be a length of old rope, dark with water, coiled loosely as it drifted north. On the 3rd night, a boot. A single waterlogged boot, moving upstream with the same purposeful calm as everything else. On the 4th night, he had been so focused on the direction of the current that he had not noticed what was being carried. He watched the 4th night's footage now. A child's wooden toy, blocky, hand-painted, the paint stripped to bare wood in places by long immersion. Moving north. Cole put his phone down on the kitchen table. He looked out the window at the river, which was moving south, the way it was supposed to, in the mid-morning light. He thought about the mountains. He thought about the fact that the river ran from the mountains through the forest to the coast, and that whatever was moving upstream was moving toward the mountains, carried there by something he could not name. He thought about how long the river had been doing this, and whether it had always done this, and whether the previous renters of the cabin, the families, the couples, the lone fishermen, had woken at 2 a.m. and stood at the railing and watched. He thought about whether they had left. That evening, Cole built a fire in the woodburner and sat beside it for a long time without reading or writing or doing anything at all. The fire worked. The wood shifted and settled. Outside, the river moved south in the last of the light. He had a thought that he turned over slowly, the way you turn over a stone to see what lies beneath it. The river was collecting something. The things it carried upstream, the rope, the boot, the toy, the fish, they were not random. He felt this with a certainty he could not support and did not try to. They were not random. Something above, in the mountains, in whatever place the upstream current was carrying everything toward, something was gathering, accumulating, building a collection of lost and discarded things, pulled back from wherever they had ended up, reclaimed by the current in the dark hours. He did not know what that meant. He was not sure he wanted to. He set up the camera that night, as he had every other night. He pressed record. He went inside. He did not sleep. He listened to the river shift at 12:53. That held stillness, and then the soft change of direction. And he lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and thought about the mountains, dark and large and very patient at the top of the valley. He thought about what it means for a river to want something. He thought about the fact that he had not once in 5 nights, felt afraid. Unsettled, yes. Uncertain, certainly. But not afraid. And he was not sure, lying there in the dark with the river moving upstream below the porch, whether that absence of fear was a comfort or its own kind of warning. On the last morning, he packed his bag. He did this slowly and deliberately, folding things rather than stuffing them, which was not his usual habit. He cleaned the grate of the woodburner. He washed his single mug and his single plate and left them on the drying rack. He replaced the key under the flat stone. He stood on the porch for a while. The river moved south. The October light came through the pines at a low angle and touched the water and turned it briefly gold before the clouds returned. A bird called somewhere in the trees. Once, twice. Then silence. The river said what rivers always say. Its low, continuous moving word. Cole looked upstream. He could not see far. The river bent after 100 meters, the bank curving away behind a stand of birch trees with their white trunks and their sparse yellow leaves. Beyond that, the mountains. He had driven past the mountains on the way in, seen their dark shapes against the sky, their permanent snow. He had not thought about them much then. They had been backdrop, context, the geography that explained the cabin and the river, and the particular quality of the light. He thought about them now. He thought about what had been carried there, and whether it was still arriving, and whether something waited at the end of that upstream journey, patient and dark and slowly, methodically whole. He got in his car. He drove south on the winding road through the pine forest, and the trees closed behind him, and the cabin disappeared from the mirror, and the river was beneath him for a moment as he crossed the bridge, and then gone. He did not play music. He drove in silence and thought about the footage on his phone. 6 nights of it, sitting in the quiet of his camera roll. And he tried to decide what he would do with it. Whether he would show it to someone. Whether he would try to explain what he had seen. He thought about the boot, drifting north. He thought about the child's toy. He thought about all the things that rivers carry, and all the places they carry them to, and whether there are currents in the world that move against the obvious direction of things, pulling lost objects back toward some patient, accumulating darkness that collects them in the night. He did not have words for it yet, but somewhere behind him, in the dark between midnight and 5, the river was still at work, still collecting, still flowing, quietly and with great purpose, the wrong way. Thank you for listening to Stillwater Chronicles, where even the quietest currents can carry something home. If this stillness stayed with you, if the sound of that river settled somewhere deep, then let it remain a little while longer. Some waters, after all, have their own reasons for moving. Rest now. The current will take you where you need to go.